Hello everyone, welcome back to another European Vassals 4 video. In this video, I will be teaching you how to become a world power and influence politics across Europe and the world while being an OPM. That's right, you can become a world power. In this case, I'm already the 7th ranked world power by just a bit after 1600, and I expect to actually shoot up quite a bit soon. While having one province. I will explain how you do that. First off, most important, vassals. These will be the backbone of your country. If you do not have vassals, you do not have an empire, and you can do nothing. Almost nothing. I mean, you still have a high development capital. That's the other important thing. In this one, there's basically going to be 3 main things you're going to want to do. Feed your vassals, develop your capital, and pick good idea groups and policies to make the first 2 more effective. Especially the first one. So if you look, let's go over developing your capital first off, because that's the simpler one. As you can see, I have a 90 development capital here in Constantinople. It is producing over 10 income for me, which is about a 1/6 of my income. Slightly more. Almost 20%. This is not an insubstantial portion, and it has other benefits as well. It also provides me with, if you look, a considerable amount of land and naval force limit, a considerable amount of sailors, a large amount of trade. You can build basically every single building in the game in it, so you won't have to worry about running out of building slots. And it will provide you a large amount of manpower. If you look, I have 20,000 manpower just from Constantinople. That's in addition to, obviously, the huge sum of money you're getting. If you look, you're going to want to be picking a province that is a center of trade and is important on the map. So, good provinces for a OPM challenge are Venezia, which has almost a third of the power in the Venice node and is protected by a strait. London, which has a significant amount in the English Channel. Genoa, which has a significant amount in the Genoa node. One of the provinces in Sri Lanka, which is not as powerful, but at least you're protected if you want to do a run in Asia. But I think my favorite, along with the Venezia province, is Constantinople. It has 2 centers of trade, and controls over a third of the trade power in the Constantinople node. Now, of course, it doesn't control this much at game start, and you will need to develop it and build buildings in it to make it control this much, but it is not unreasonable for you to have your capital province controlling at least a third of the trade power in your primary node by 1600. Now, let's talk about vassals. I prefer to divide vassals into 3 categories. I'm just gonna call them your tax farms. If you have studied history, you may know of a practice called tax farming. This was when a ruler needed to collect taxes, but either did not have or did not want to make the bureaucracy to actually manage collecting those taxes. So he would sell out the privilege of collecting taxes to one of his nobles or just someone else who was a tax collector. And they would go from door to door and collect taxes, and they would have to meet a quota of a certain amount of taxes collected, and they would give that quota to the state. However, any taxes in excess of that they could keep for themselves. So for part of your subjects, I would say 2 or 3 would be a good number. I have 2 right now. You will want these to be your tax farms, or just tax farmers. you want to make as much money as possible out of the land, even if it's more money than the land actually has. So if you look here, Maria is paying us 12.75 each month. They're making a grand total of 12.85. And if that sounds like being slightly less efficient than owning the land yourself, until you factor in that vassals get a base of 1 tax. This vassal is paying us more income than it is getting from its provinces. This is significant. This is very significant. You will want to keep this in mind for later on. This means that by having vassals control our land, we could actually get significantly more tax than we could get from maintaining the land ourselves. In addition, there's another benefit that may not be obvious at first glance. Their expenses. They are paying 1 ducat, actually slightly more than that, in state maintenance and fort maintenance for us, that we don't have to. Now, to be fair, their forts are not doing much because they are in scutage. They are not joining our wars. However, the state maintenance is an important thing to latch onto. So we are effectively getting slightly more than 2 extra ducats monthly just from having our province of Maria own these provinces instead of us. So since our subject owns them, and we don't own them directly, we're actually getting more money. If we look at Bulgaria, it's a similar situation. I won't go into all the details, but an important thing to note is that the amount of money you get from vassals is solely based on their tax income. Again, we are getting slightly less than their total income, but once you factor in, again, the 1 ducat, they own just flat base, we're actually getting more than if we owned provinces ourselves, again, not having to pay the state maintenance. So we're earning, again, a profit from having it being maintained by our vassal. So you're going to want to have 1 or 2 piggy bank subjects. They basically exist to give you money to feed your army. Now, by having them enable scutage, and having the right idea groups, which we can go into detail later on, this serves 2 purposes. It will obviously make you stronger, because you have more money to feed your army, so you can get either mercs or cannons or something. And it weakens them. They will be in a permanent debt spiral of going into more and more and more debt until you can see they're like 2,000 ducats in debt. It's ridiculous. So they're never going to get out of this. If you look, they're paying over 5 ducats monthly in interest. This is stupid. They are already spending basically all of their income just paying their vassal fee. It is impossible for them to get out of this debt spiral, and this is good for us. They don't need an army because they're maintaining scutage. It would give us no benefit for them to have an army. And because they're in debt, the AI is programmed not to make any troops when it's in debt, if it's a subject, and it's loyal. So, this decreases the liberty desire from relative strengths of power, which means you can divert trade, and get even more money, and increase relative strengths. You can see this cycle start to see how this can make sense. Okay, moving on. You're also going to have 1 or 2 subjects, actually just 1 usually, who are your trade subjects. These subjects' job is not to make you money directly through tax, although they will do that. They have a taxation of 3.55, and they're giving us 3.057. And remember, extra 1 ducat, so it's their actual tax income from provinces is 2.55, so again, we're earning a profit even from this. But this is not their main goal. Oh no, 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 no. They are giving us way more than 7 ducats monthly. This subject will be the subject you feed all your centers of trade to. If you look, this subject should have 10, 20, 25% of the trade in Constantinople. But they don't, because they are transferring their trade power to us so generously. Now, if you just add up that with our base of 35%, you can already see we have a 60% trade in this trade node. Just from those provinces that are one vassal loans that they're transferring trade power, and us. Now, how can you keep this subject loyal if they're transferring trade power? That usually makes the subject disloyal unless they're really weak. Well, here's the thing, you only give them centers of trade. And you don't enable scutage. You can enable scutage if you want, and then when you're in a war, you can just take the province yourself and give the province to your vassal afterwards. Either sell province if you don't have the DLC for the Cossacks, or grant core, or grant province, whatever, if you do have the DLC. But I prefer not enabling feudage. This means they will participate in your wars, and get themselves in debt. If ever they have liberty desire problems, simply pay off their debt. Now, enabling feudage also works to get them into debt, because they're paying more income than they're getting. But it is somewhat risky, because if they do go above 50%, then it's hard for you to maintain control. Because if you have enabled scutage, they will not join your wars, and if they go above 50%, you're going to have to disable transfer trade, which will only make them stronger and you weaker, and that can start a chain reaction in which all of your subjects become disloyal, and you really don't want that. So, I prefer to leave scutage off and have them join my wars. So, those are the first two. The economic powerhouses, which devastate their land for your own benefit, and pay you more than they should legally have, and trade, subjects, which are here, Aiden. That's my, you should only really have one, unless it starts getting really disloyal, in which case you can have two. Bulgaria is somewhat a mix, in this case, of a money subject and a trade subject. I've added the Crimean centers of trade, as you can see. These subject types are not mutually exclusive, by the way, except for this last one with, trading subjects. It's by definition exclusive. Your last subject type will be your PU subjects. These subjects are who you're going to be feeding the vast majority of your provinces to. These subjects are the ones who will be your military powerhouses to help you in wars. They cannot be trade subjects because you cannot transfer trade from PUs, and PUs are the only subjects which really work with this strategy. You will need at least one PU, preferably more as you get later into the game, but you really only need one, as I have here. And you can feed them almost an infinite amount of land, because they have an insanely low liberty desire. If you look, they will actually have a base of -20 from their opinion of you, assuming you can keep it at 200, which you should easily be able to. -20 from their trust of you, which will increase gradually over time, so that shouldn't be an issue. -15 from your policies, and they should have anywhere from -10 to -15%. I actually have low legitimacy, it should usually be 15%. So, they actually have a base of -70% liberty desires. This is humongous. Now, you might not think this is a big deal, because all your subjects have that. But, PUs have another property which makes it insanely powerful. They only measure their own relative power. This means if you have a PU subject and 10 other subjects, the PU subject will only measure their own relative power when considering how strong they are compared to you, while the other subjects will only consider everyone's all of your subjects' relative power except your PUs. This means that you can feed your PUs a huge amount of land without them being disloyal. Because, if you look, they gain 66% liberty desire from their relative power. And since you can already feed them up to 120% liberty desire from that, because the 50% from being disloyal and a base of negative 70, you can actually feed them quite a lot. They can be actually almost twice as powerful as you and still be loyal. And if you pay off their debts, I mean, they can be loyal for a really long time. And if you develop their provinces, they can be loyal indefinitely. You don't even have to develop it a lot. But even without developing and paying off their debt, they should easily be loyal if you have done the strategy correctly. Now, for the last part of the strategy, it may seem like managing your subjects and developing your provinces are the two most important parts. Probably managing your subjects is even the most important. But that isn't possible to do correctly unless you have picked the right idea groups. I will now show you what idea groups are necessary for this strategy to work. There are a few necessary idea groups here. Now, you may not think that these are all necessary, but if you do not have them, you are in for a very, very hard time right here. Now, first most, I'm going to rate these in the order of most essential to least essential. Number 1, most essential is influence. All of these policies will be almost all of these will be very, very useful and really essential for this to work. If you do not have influence, you cannot do the strategy at all. The plus 25% income from vassals is huge. This basically makes all of this possible. Minus 15% liberty desire. This allows you to feed your subjects much more than normal. This makes the strategy much easier. Not as necessary as the plus 25% income from vassals, but still hugely important. Less annexation cost is really useless, because I'm assuming if you're doing this strategy, you're not going to be wanting to annex your subjects. But maybe you are, so it might be useful. Diplomatic relations. Huge. You can have an extra subject. It is always good. You should always maintain to try to have the most of a few modifiers in this one. These will be actually not that many, but they will be hugely important, and let me list those for you. Number 1 most important modifier in this strategy, income from vassals. This will be your number 1 top priority in this strategy. Number 2 most important is actually diplomatic reputation. This may seem odd, but if you look, because I have both influence and diplomatic, I actually have plus 4 diplomatic reputation. Each point of diplomatic reputation you have reduces liberty desire by 5%. That means that I have a minus 20% modifier to liberty desire in my subjects just from diplomatic reputation. That is huge. Combined with this, that gives me a base of minus 35%. That is enormous. So that is really your second most important modifier you're going to want to be looking out for. Diplomatic relations is your third. The more vassals you can have, the better. You can feed them more land, you can get more PUs, it's just always better to be able to have more subjects. And then, the fourth most important is actually not liberty desire from subjects. It's actually army force limit. This may seem like an odd choice, but force limit is actually critical for keeping the liberty desire of your subjects intact. The relative power is actually the main determining factor in how loyal your provinces are. If you do not have enough force limit, you cannot keep your vassals loyal. Look at my force limit right now. If I just had Constantinople, I would have 15 force limit. I get 9 force limit from it because it is 90 development. But I have vassals. So, I get 7 force limit from Bulgaria, 10 from Maria, 5 from Aden, 5 from Saruhan, and I get an extra 50% boost on top of that from quantity ideas. So that actually buffs all of the previous things by 50%. So it would be effectively 15 force limit for Maria, for an example. Now, that is going to obviously be hugely important. So this modifier is actually the best way to increase your force limit, because most of your force limit will be coming from vassals. If you look here, only a base of 9 of my force limit is coming from my capital. I'm not going to be including the plus 50% from quantity, because that doesn't affect the ratio. Only 9 of my force limit is coming from my capital. If you look, I have a lot more than that coming from subjects. I have 28 force limit coming from my subjects. Just take that in. Have you taken it in yet? That's over 3 times as much as I'm getting from my capital. 3/4 of your force limit or more will be coming from your subjects. So this modifier right here, amazing. This can almost double your force limit just by itself. The next most important, believe it or not, is economic. Now, this may actually seem like an obvious choice at first, for the minus 20% development cost. Of course you're going to want to develop your capital, and minus 20 development cost is huge. It's not, though, actually. Because if you look at how much it costs to develop, it costs... Once you get to a certain point, it will cost you into hundreds of monarch points. At this point, I'm at 90 development, nearing 100 development. It costs me over 500 monarch points to get 1 extra development in my capital. That is a huge amount. And it may seem like, oh, 500. 20% of that's 100 monarch points each time you develop. That's a huge point saver. But unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. It actually gives minus 20% off the base cost of 50%. It actually only saves you 10 points, not 100. Which, it's still important. It will save you hundreds of monarch points over this one, possibly thousands. It's still a good thing to have. But it's not the be-all and end-all that it's made out to be, in the ideas, because it's off the base cost, not the, final cost. The vast majority of the cost will actually be from the development plus 1,000 something percent that I have, because I have so much development, not the base cost. But there's actually another more important reason you take economic ideas. Besides for it being a solid idea group, with it giving you more national tax, which it maybe will give you an extra half a ducat if you're lucky. Construction cost is actually very useful, because you're going to be spending thousands of ducats on building, so this will actually save you a lot in the long term. Yearly inflation is always nice. You can demand tons of ducats and take out loans, although you won't really need to take out loans. If you do the strategy correctly, you'll be swimming in money. And without suffering a large amount of long-term repercussions, and you can get some really nice events. Interest, same thing as before, nice modifier to have, but you shouldn't be needing to take out loans for this strategy. Monthly autonomy change is completely useless, because you will only be keeping your capital, and this does not apply to your subjects. Land maintenance modifier, somewhat marginally useful. Might save you half a ducat. Production efficiency, marginally useful. It only applies to yourself, so maybe, again, an extra half a ducat. But there's actually a huge reason to take economic. Besides the construction cost, which will save you hundreds or thousands of ducats throughout the game, it's actually the policies it unlocks. If you pair it with quality, which is an idea group you will be taking anyway for this strategy, you get an extra 5% discipline. If you pair it with diplomatic, you get extra national tax, which isn't that great. The quantity one seems good at first glance, with extra thing to force limit and development cost, both of which are incredibly useful to the strategy, but you have to remember, the force limit modifier is nice, but the development cost is, again, to the base cost, so it's not very helpful. The best policy from this, and actually, this would make this idea group worth taking just on its own, is the Vassal Obligations Act. Plus 25% income from vassals, and plus 100% vassal force limit contribution. Since you've already taken influence, and gotten a huge boost to your force limit already, this will maybe increase your now higher force limit by an additional 50%, which will be another huge boost, and this will actually give you a bigger boost to your force limits than taking quantity ideas. Just take that in. But, again, even more important than that, plus 25% income from vassals. That's the most important modifier we are looking for. So, just having influence and economic, you have plus 50% base, extra tax from vassals, and you have an additional plus 200% vassal force limit contribution. So you already have huge boosts of vassals from this. If you look at my policies, you should always have this active. There is no reason for you to ever not have this active. Now, for your third idea group, it's actually a toss-up. I personally think that you could go either quality or quantity. I went quantity, but I'm actually not sure if I made the right decision here. Let me explain the upsides of both, because they both give huge advantages to you taking them. Quantity gives you an effective 50% boost to manpower, along with some other boosts to military that are helpful in getting you a larger military. These boosts are mainly actually to help with Liberty Desire. They are a huge boost militarily, yeah, but you'll already be fielding a huge military from this. The secondary purpose of this is actually military. It's a great idea group for military. I'm not denying that. It's great, and it will really help you out in military. But, past influence, I'd actually argue that even before diplomatic, this is the second best idea group for reducing Liberty Desire in vassals. Influence is the first, then quantity, then diplomatic. Just because the AI doesn't actually care about army quality, it only cares about army quantity. So the more troops you have, the stronger it will think you are. And since that's what vassals base do the majority of their Liberty Desire off of, this is incredibly useful. Unfortunately, it doesn't have that many good policies. As we've already discussed, pairing it with economic gives a small development cost and land force limit increase, which is useful if you have no other military policies, but it's not very good. Not very good at all. Pairing it with diplomatic will give you, again, a small boost to land force limit and diplomatic reputation, but it's a military idea group. So you're going to be hard-pressed with the other thing, influence ideas, attrition for enemies, and national garrison growth. I actually should switch over. I just have been too lazy right now. That is actually an error on my part that I have not switched over to this. In fact, I'm going to switch over to it right now. Actually, yeah, let's switch over to it for right now. Since this idea group is mainly amazing for reducing your vassal's Liberty Desire. And the last thing, plus 50% land force limit. This is going to be a huge boost to your force limit. You've already had two huge boosts from influence and your influence economic policy, which gives you an additional plus 25% vassal income and plus 100% force limit. So you're already going to have a huge boost to force limit. This will multiply all of the previous boosts by 50%. So it's effectively multiplying your force limit by 1.5. This is huge. Again, biggest modifier to Vassal Liberty Desire out of the whole idea group, and the manpower by itself is already a huge modifier. So quantity is really useful if you're struggling to keep your vassals loyal. Next up, diplomatic. The extra diplomats are really nice to handle aggressive expansion and keeping your vassals happy, but they're actually not the best ideas in this set. Improved relations will make your aggressive expansion decay faster, as well as obviously helping you improve relations faster, which is actually pretty useful. Diplomatic relations is always very useful. As we said, it is one of the most important modifiers you want to keep in mind. And diplomatic reputation is also incredibly useful. Province war score cost, again, is very useful. Diplomatic technology cost sounds great. It is good, but it's not as good as it sounds. It will save you a decent amount of points throughout the course of the game, but it's not worth taking the idea group just to get it. And lowered impact on stability from diplomatic actions. This is actually more useful than it sounds with the Vassal Swarm strategy, because you can declare on a random OPM that has a lot of cores. I actually did it with Hungary, and take their only province. Then you release them as a vassal and force your dynasty upon them. Then you release their subject status, so they are independent. Then they'll often get swallowed by a nearby neighbor, and either you or someone else can go declare war on that neighbor and force them to release said nation. Then said nation will be very, very happy to see you and will have a huge opinion boost and have your dynasty. You then, when they don't have an heir, claim their throne, declare war for enforcing a PU, and you have an instant PU. This is what I did to get Trebizond as a PU. This gives you a luck-free way of getting PUs, so you don't have to rely on lucky strategies or being hugely skilled with getting your dynasties on everyone's throne. You can just have a reliable method of getting PUs. It's not as fast or as easy, and it will involve some small hits to stability, but these will be mitigated by diplomatic ideas. Now, the last idea group I'd recommend for this strategy is actually quality. It may seem random, because it doesn't actually give you that many good things by itself, but it's actually like economic, in which the main selling points are actually its ideas. As you can see, you get plus 5% discipline, which is awesome. Extra discipline is always nice. It's actually probably what I'm going to take for my idea once I can. You have a policy for minus war exhaustion and diplomatic reputation, which is okay if you really need extra diplomatic reputation. But, most important point, do you see it yet? I think you see it. Do you see it? It's the Integrated Administration Act. Plus 25% income from vassals, plus 10% institution spread. Once you take this, even without scutage, vassals are required to pay you more than 100% of their tax income. Now, with scutage, that's over 150%. You can make ludicrous amounts of money off of this, even more than I'm making right now, because I haven't finished the idea group yet. Once you get this idea group, you are a true economic powerhouse. Combine it with the previous policy, with economic influence policy of plus 25% income from vassals, plus 100% vassal force contribution from the Vassal Obligation Act. You are unstoppable. Your vassals will never revolt, because they'll never have enough money to. They will literally be giving you more money than they're earning from tax. And since your vassals tend to earn the majority of their money from tax income for some reason, and not goods produced, they will have no money left. They will always go into debt. This is actually amazing for you, because they will never build units, and they will feed you all their money. Every single last bit of it. Now, what other idea groups would I recommend taking? Those 5 ideas. You could even take out quantity and have that full idea set, and just have quality. But I'd actually recommend taking quality. So this core of 5 idea sets that you can get by 1650 easily will, once 1650 hits, or even actually a bit sooner, if you can focus on mill after picking quality, will make you a powerhouse once, the year is a bit past 1600. I have a few other suggestions. I actually recommend against trade, because by this point you should be making more than enough money off your subjects. You can do it if you want, but I wouldn't recommend it. Likewise, I would recommend against expansion and, exploration, unless you're really doing a full-on colonization game. In which case, it's actually better not to have a vassal swarm. Administrative is completely useless because the main feature of it, its procreation cost, doesn't apply to you. Humanist is again completely useless because all of these bonuses don't apply. Religious unity isn't a problem because you only have one province. And the tolerance of heathens doesn't matter because again, you only have one province that will be of your religion. You could take another military idea group if you're struggling with military. Offensive is always nice for the extra force limit and discipline, as well as the extra lethal pips and siege ability. It's all in all a nice idea group. If you look at its policies, though you can get some extra diplomatic reputation, extra available mercenaries, which I've actually never had to be a problem, extra diplomatic relations, which, if you paired with influence, which you should always have, which I would actually say is really nice because they're hard to come by, diplomatic relation slots. So if you're struggling for diplomatic relation costs and you need a better military, go offensive. But I'd actually consider going religious. DS Volt won't really help past the early game, and you'll be taking it past the early game, because you obviously want to go with the 5 idea groups I said, just to get the maximum income you can early game. If you look at its policies, extra missionary strength, religious unity, which will be completely useless. Pairing it with quantity will give you some extra morale of armies. Okay. Influence, cultural conversion cost completely useless, you won't be converting cultures yourself. It doesn't have very good policies, but it does give you substantial boosts to religious conversion and reduces the cost, most importantly. If you go Byzantium, you can pair it with your extra 3% missionary strength in your idea set and actually really quickly convert your vassal's territory. You actually don't need to take religious. For your last 3 idea sets, honestly, you could go all military, because there is actually not that many good idea groups for you to pick past this. Religious is really only situational if you're feeding a Christian PU Anatolia, which of course you'll want to do. But if you're not, and you're just feeding Anatolia to your Sunni subjects, they can handle, the revolts themselves. They will, suppress the rebels, increase autonomy, and they actually won't have many, if at all, uprisings that you, as the Overlord, have to go waste your manpower and time dealing with. If you're feeding it to a subject of a different religion, however, like I did, you'll definitely want to go religious, because their provinces, if you look, will be in constant turmoil. This still has unrest, and I gave it to them way long ago. It doesn't even have any separatism, and it still has unrest. If not for the -100 from the recent uprising, it would have almost 4 unrest. If you look at a province I gave it more recently, it has 15 unrest. If you don't include the recent uprising modifier. When that goes away, it will have 15 unrest, and it will revolt again. And your vassals will have to spend military points suppressing the rebels, which is not good. You want to be having them keep up in military tech so they can help you fight, especially your PU subjects, because you want most of your subjects to go into debt. I would say you want all your normal subjects to go into debt, paying you. Except your PU subjects, who you're feeding most of the land to, you want them to be in top fighting shape. Because their relative power actually won't really be a problem for Liberty Desire for forever. So I would go religious to convert the land that your vassals get. So religious is a good idea. Offensive is a good idea. I mean, past that, for your last slot, I mean, I really don't know what to say. I guess if you really needed extra money, or you had no idea what else to do, you could go trade. Now, I know everyone will hate me for saying this, but you might want to consider going espionage as a last resort, because if you are running low on CVs, you can actually get the idea to fabricate claims for subjects. The reduced aggressive expansion is also pretty nice. Past that, though, there's not much of a reason to take espionage in an actual serious game. Its policies aren't amazing. Its ideas aren't amazing. It's not an amazing idea group. You won't even be needing some amazing minus yearly corruption idea because you won't have any corruption from overextension. So, I recommend actually not taking it, in general, because by the time you get to a high enough tech to take it, you should already have the Imperialism CV. So you shouldn't need to be able to fabricate claims for your subjects, and they should actually be doing that pretty well themselves. Maritime actually isn't a bad idea. If you look at its ideas, they give you substantial boosts to your navy. But the naval force limit modifier is actually maybe one thing you'd want to go for, because you're going to have a really weak navy in this game. When you only have one province, you actually won't be able to do much with your navy, because you only have a force limit, for your navy of 9. That's really sad. That's really, really sad. I even built a shipyard, and that only gives me an additional 2. Plus my base force limit. I only have a force limit of 23 in 1631. And I started out as Byzantium, with only coastal provinces. So, you're definitely gonna wanna either ignore navy entirely, or take any boost you can to it. I prefer taking any boost you can. But it's actually not that important. If you, take any boosts you can, then you can prevent troops from landing in, like, Anatolia across the sea. But even still, you won't have to worry much, because you should still easily be able to control the straits, so people blockading you shouldn't matter. And, again, even if they do, it hurts your subjects' income, not yours, so it doesn't affect you too badly. Now, that's actually mostly it for the strategy. Just a few last remarks. I would recommend promoting any half-price advisors you get from an event, past 1550 or 1600 or so, to +3. I did it to +5, which was overboard. I'm paying way more for this guy than I should now anymore. And I'll probably just hire another one, +1 guy, because I don't feel like paying 20 ducats a month for him. But definitely, I was only paying like 6 ducats for him at +3. So definitely, promote any half-price advisors you get from events up to +3 if you have the DLC. I think you need Mandate of Heaven. You don't need to accept any cultures because you'll only have your main one. It's always a good idea to force your dynasty on your subjects' thrones, if they are of the same religion, and they are below 25% liberty desire. You can always develop your province, or subjects' provinces, and then place your guy on their throne, but it isn't that big of a deal that you should spend mono points to do it. Just when you have a moment of strength and they're in a moment of weakness, like you just paid off their debts for some reason, which you shouldn't ever do unless you're having serious liberty desire problems, because them being in debt literally has no effect on you. What else? I just would like to say that if I did, once I do finish quality actually, not if, and I get the extra 25% income from Vassals, I'll actually, be making, if you look here, more than 25% more, because that is an additive modifier, not a multiplicative. So I'll be making, almost 30 ducats a month, just from Vassals directly, not even counting trade. That's huge. That means after you finish off your first idea groups, your Vassals will be paying you about, if you have enabled disputed, of course, 1.5 to 2 times as much income as you get if you had owned the land normally. A few other last tips. and tricks I'd like to recommend for this. Always, always build churches in every single one of your subjects' provinces, excluding your PU. I built it in my PU because I just had extra money to spend and I didn't know what to do with it. But you actually get, believe it or not, hilariously, after you take your first 5 idea groups and enable the policies for the additional income from subjects, and after having enabled feudage, you get more income from taxes by building churches in your subjects' provinces than you do from your own. Take that in for a moment. You actually get significantly more. You get over 1.5 times as much. And they actually lose more money the higher their tax income is. So this is a great way of both reducing your subjects' liberty desire and of increasing your own power, thereby also decreasing your subjects' liberty desire. So building churches everywhere you can is a great idea. Also building marketplaces everywhere you can and having your subjects transfer trade power to you, great idea. Again, I'm making a ton of my money, although half my income off trade right now. Let's see, anything else? I wouldn't recommend spending so much on a Diplo advisor as I did. For developing provinces, here's actually what I've learned from my experience with development. I recommend spending any extra military points and diplomatic points you get developing your capital. I recommend spending any extra admin points you have developing your subjects' provinces. Because it will increase your liberty desire, but it will also decrease it temporarily, and really at this point, after a certain point in the game, as long as you're handling it in a reasonable fashion, liberty desire in your subjects should never be an issue for you. Ever. Ever, 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 ever be an issue for you. And again, as I said earlier, the same principle applies for the developing admin as with the churches. Since it's admin points you're developing, that gives your vassals extra national tax income, which, if you remember, gets siphoned off to you with a nice 1.5 multiplicative boost, which is really nice. Really, really, really nice. Actually, it's more like 1.5 to 2.0 times later game. So definitely you should spend your admin developing your subjects' provinces, not your capital. That was a mistake I made, where I spent a ton of admin developing my base tax in my capital, and I really didn't get much from it. I spent maybe a tenth as much developing my subjects' Maria's provinces, because, like, I spent maybe a couple hundred admin developing their provinces, and it raised their income by 5 ducats, or, 4 or 5 ducats or so, that I was getting from them. Whereas, if I had spent that same amount, assuming I could even get to 500, which I couldn't, I get maybe 0.2 extra ducats from developing my capital from admin. So it's definitely wiser to develop your subjects' provinces, for at least admin power than your own. For the other 2 power groups, I actually recommend developing them in your capital, because, developing your capital is really the only way you'll get extra manpower. And you need manpower, obviously. And developing your capital is really gonna be your main source of it. I'm actually getting 2/3 of my base manpower from having developed my capital. And I think that's one thing I did do correctly. Your vassals, manpower doesn't actually help you. Because remember, they're gonna be in debt all the time. Which is a good thing. Not a bad thing. Don't think it's a bad thing. Like, if I'd exploited development, I could get 14,000 manpower. It's stupid. It's still a terrible deal. It's a better exchange rate for doing professionalism, because it costs 1/10 as much to hire a general, even assuming you don't have max professionalism, and then slackening recruitment standards, and you get 2/3 as much manpower, so it's a terrible, terrible deal, but still, it's funny to think about. developing diplomatic power will actually give you a larger boost to your income than developing with admin power, assuming you have a decent trade good. And if you're playing as Byzantium, you will have a good trade good. Glass is actually an amazing trade good. Even assuming you can't get the event that gives you gems in Constantinople early game, if you have at least 50 prestige and have embraced the Renaissance, which, by the way, is an amazing event. You should always aim to get at least 50 prestige by the time the Renaissance rolls around. I did not manage to do it. But still, glass is almost as good as gems early game, and basically just as good late game. Not quite, but basically. So you get almost twice as much from developing your Diplo as you do from developing admin in your capital, and it's really the only place to spend your Diplo. If you develop your subjects provinces, it does nothing for you because you get none of their production, and since and their own production doesn't matter because they're going to be going into a debt spiral no matter how much you develop their production income anyway. So that's basically just wasting Diplo and giving them more liberty desire from having more development long term, so it's a lose-lose proposition. So the only reasonable thing to do with extra Diplo power is to develop your capital. You could develop mercantilism, but I actually find that since you only have one province, it really isn't worth it. Just select the events that give you it, and you should be fine getting a decent amount. It really doesn't help you having more mercantilism. You're getting a majority of the trade power in your home node anyway, and when you aren't, it's mainly just because of, like, Wallachia taking over Hungary, or something stupid, or Venice. Actually, Trebizond in this case, it looks like Venice. Venice is dead. It ain't Hungary. It was Hungary for Hungary. Okay, I'll stop. Yeah. But, yeah, I think I've babbled on enough about subjects. I just wanted to showcase the strategy to show, yes, subjects are useful. They're very useful, in fact. It's not by any means the most efficient way to play the game if you're min-maxing. You could definitely earn more income if you expanded outside of one province. There's no reason to be stuck in one province. That's stupid. But it is an alternative playstyle that you can try, and the reason you play games is to really have fun. And I think that trying new things in Europa Universalis 4, if I can ever say the name correctly, is fun. And that's why I did it, to have fun. It's a really fun way of playing, to limit yourself to only one province, and to have this huge vassal swarm that's paying you insane amounts of money. That's about it. I hope you have enjoyed. Maybe it has given you thoughts on starting your own one-province challenge, or maybe just using vassals more in regular places, because all of this can be applied to normal places. These idea sets aren't terrible idea sets for normal play, especially since you'll be taking religious, which is good anyway. The only difference is you might want to take administrative as well early on. But all of this can be applied to normal play, minus staying inside one province. You can take these same ideas and get the same amazing bonuses to vassals and have a good economic base on your own. But if you consider doing this in a normal playthrough and keeping only the amount of provinces you have up to your state limit, and then feeding any extra provinces to vassals and using this strategy, I think you could make a boatload of money. Like, more than you usually do with an empire like this. Just a thought. And you can actually make marches. They'd actually be useful, unlike me. Because I can't make marches because I have so little development. Okay, bye. I hope you have enjoyed the video. Like if you've enjoyed, subscribe if you want to see more. All that stuff. You know.